Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a fascinating high-stakes ethical tribunal from ancient texts. We're looking at a specific excerpt from the Vaivahika Parva, and it's all about a highly controversial marriage proposal. But this isn't just a simple mythological story, it's a literal masterclass in ancient legal and moral debate. We'll map out the exact arguments laid out by the key figures in the text so you can see firsthand how these leaders navigated a massive cultural taboo without completely tearing their society apart.
Right off the bat, we're hit with a central conflict. King Drupada presents a deeply provocative question to the wise Rishi Vyasa, sparking a profound debate about custom versus conscience. He asks, how can this union possibly happen without the bride being defiled by sin? And for these characters, the stakes literally couldn't be higher. Drupada isn't just throwing out a casual hypothetical over dinner. He's genuinely terrified that this union will spiritually damn them all. It's pure existential dread, and this fear of immense sin becomes the anchor for everything that follows.
Let's set the stage for this royal dilemma. So, who's in the room? We're not dealing with everyday folks having a chat in the town square. The text describes a gathering of illustrious, incredibly powerful figures taking their costly seats in a grand room. At the center of it all is the revered sage Krishna Dvaipayana, also known as Vyasa. And he's seated on a carpet of gold, a huge visual cue of his immense, unquestionable authority. Around him, you've got King Drupada, the Pandava brothers, Dhrishtadyumna, and Queen Kunti, all gathered in what must have been incredibly tense silence, waiting for Vyasa to rule on this unbelievably taboo subject. In this setup, Vyasa isn't just giving advice. He's basically the Supreme Court judge.
But here's the twist that makes this text so compelling. Instead of handing down a simple yes or no, Vyasa brilliantly turns this gathering into a courtroom drama. He acknowledges right out of the gate that the practice is opposed to usage and the Vedas. It's obsolete. But rather than shutting the marriage down right there, he demands that each leader present their case. He wants to hear their internal logic. This is such a modern approach to an ethical dilemma, forcing all the stakeholders to actually vocalize their reasoning before he drops a final binding verdict.
So, let's hear the case against Polyandry.
King Drupada takes the floor first to present the traditionalist argument, and he argues that the practice is outright sinful. For Drupada, the logic is ironclad. There's absolutely no historical precedent among illustrious figures and zero religious text supporting it. He states flatly that nowhere has he seen many men having one wife. And we really have to remember what the Vedas meant to this society. They were the ultimate unquestionable law. Morality in Drupada's worldview is dictated strictly by precedent and scripture. Since the wise shouldn't ever commit a sin, and this practice looks exactly like a sin based on tradition, he just refuses to allow it. It's a strictly by-the-book interpretation.
Then, Drupada's son, Dhrishtadyumna, steps in and adds a very human, deeply psychological layer to the argument. He points out how complex and confusing morality actually is. He calls the rules of right and wrong subtle, essentially arguing that while we might not know all the cosmic rules, we absolutely know when something feels viscerally wrong. Honestly, he's leaning into the sheer awkwardness of the proposed family dynamic. How can an elder brother approach a younger brother's wife with a safe conscience? For him, if the conscience isn't safe and the family dynamic feels this incredibly messy, the actions simply cannot be right.
Now it's time for Yudhishthira's defense.
We're witnessing a timeless clash of ideas here. On one side, you have the traditionalist view held by Drupada. It's rigid. If an act is opposed to established usage, it's inherently a sin. But then Yudhishthira takes the floor and introduces a completely competing virtue. He brings in the pragmatist view, arguing that obedience to a superior is always meritorious. This right here is the absolute crux of the text we're exploring today. What happens when two deeply held moral frameworks, strict adherence to written law versus the deep conviction of personal and familial duty, collide head-on?
Yudhishthira boldly places immense trust in his own internal compass, which, you have to admit, is a highly radical stance in a society built on strict Vedic rules. He tells the room that his tongue never utters an untruth and his heart never inclines to what's sinful. Because of that, he makes this defining claim: "When my heart approveth of it, it can never be sinful." That is a massive philosophical shift. He's arguing that a pure, clear conscience is the ultimate guide, completely capable of overriding standard societal norms.
But he doesn't just rely on his feelings to win a legal debate. Yudhishthira smartly brings out the historical receipts to completely dismantle Drupada's claim of no precedent. He cites the Purana, bringing up two specific ancient examples of highly virtuous women who united with multiple men. First, Jatila of the Gautama race, who married 7 rishis, and second, a tree-born ascetic's daughter who married the 10 Prachetas brothers. These aren't just random people. These are absolute heavy hitters in their historical lore. By bringing them up, Yudhishthira brilliantly flips Drupada's whole argument upside down.
But there's another crucial element here: the mother's command. The ultimate trump card in Yudhishthira's argument is something far more personal than historical lore. It's his mother's word. Yudhishthira argues that among all superiors, the mother is the absolute foremost. The context here is really crucial. Earlier in the story, Queen Kunti explicitly commanded the brothers to share Draupadi just as they would anything obtained as alms, not realizing at the time she was referring to a bride. Yet the command was spoken. For Yudhishthira, ignoring a mother's direct command would be a far greater, much more catastrophic sin than breaking a societal marriage taboo. So the hierarchy of duties here firmly places filial piety above conventional marital laws.
And right on cue, Kunti herself chimes in to validate this, speaking out of deep anxiety. She's utterly terrified that her speech, her command to her sons, will become untrue. She pleads directly with Vyasa, asking how she can possibly be saved from this untruth. You can feel that this isn't just about her wanting to win a philosophical debate. It's a genuine existential fear of committing a grave sin by having her spoken words invalidated. The weight of a mother's spoken word is treated with absolute gravity here.
Finally, we arrive at the sage's secret.
After all these incredibly nuanced arguments are laid bare, it's finally time for the sage Vyasa to deliver his verdict. And his ruling is stunning. Vyasa authoritatively rules in favor of Yudhishthira and Kunti. He assures Kunti she'll be saved from untruth and declares the proposed union not just acceptable, but an eternal virtue. He publicly states there is no doubt that Yudhishthira's reasoning is completely conformable to virtue. Boom! The highest moral authority in the room has just entirely validated the defense's pragmatic, conscience-based argument.
But the story doesn't end with a simple public ruling. The aftermath takes a highly structured and fascinating turn. First, we get that public validation we just talked about, satisfying the broader group. Second, Vyasa literally takes Drupada by the hand. And third, they retreat alone to a private apartment while the rest of the illustrious gathering simply sits in the hall and waits. Vyasa, in his immense wisdom, knows that while Yudhishthira's logic is sound enough for a public decree, King Drupada's strict traditionalist heart needs a much deeper, private explanation of how this practice could possibly not be regarded as sinful. And that leaves us with a massive cliffhanger. What profound, secret justification did Vyasa share privately with the king in that room to fully change his mind? The text stops the main narrative right as he begins his private discourse to explain how polyandry could not be regarded as sinful in this specific case. It perfectly illustrates why delving into ancient ethical texts remains so incredibly fascinating today. They give us complex legal dramas, competing moral frameworks, and private mysteries that force us to constantly evaluate how we balance societal rules with personal conscience. So what do you think Vyasa said behind those closed doors? Thank you for exploring this remarkable explainer with me today.